a client unfortunately was left in a bed.
Tonight, the I-Team investigation, assisted living secrets.
This vital medication, just stop.
Allegations of neglect, runaway residents, charges of fraud.
It's despicable.
And that's not all.
Caregiver who admitted to stealing from residents, not documented. Does that surprise you?
The I-Team discovered Florida law requires the state to keep confidential critical information about assisted living facilities.
ABC Action News anchor Paul Legrone uncovers the state law that's keeping the public in the dark.
From an 81-year-old scaling a 6-foot fence to a nursing home employee charged with stealing from residents.
Then there's the case of Mr. John Katz. In 2017, the 72-year-old went missing from his assisted living facility here in Sarasota. Days later, witnesses found him right here along 17th Street, just one street over from the facility, lying face down in that retention pond, dead.
3 cases with one thing in common. They made our newscast, but they were never documented on the state database run by the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration, known as AHCA. We followed the paper trail, searching through our own news archives, police reports, and court records, and found a dozen local cases over 6 years that are not listed on AHCA's website, the same website families are encouraged to use to check out a facility's record.
How is it good enough to wind up on the 6 o'clock news, but it's not good enough to show up on AHCA's website?
That's a good question.
Attorney Peter Sartez says most of his cases rarely show up on AHCA's website, including this one, a 95-year-old woman who wasn't getting her medication. Her daughter found her covered in her own feces. She died 3 months later.
No one ever called us and said it was looked into, and we have new procedures in place. So this doesn't happen again to anybody else. We heard from nobody.
Does that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. And the reason it doesn't surprise me is because you're asking for someone that is subject to being sanctioned to self-report. And a lot of times it just doesn't happen.
But we found out it goes far beyond AHCA not knowing. It turns out the state is keeping certain information about assisted living facilities confidential. Right here in the state law, there's a confidential clause that says so-called adverse incidents, which includes everything from residents wandering off to staff committing crimes, are kept confidential. AHCA declined an on-camera interview but sent us this statement saying, in part, the confidentiality of the reports are intended to encourage a culture of transparency, so the facility will self-identify issues and implement corrections.
Doesn't the public have a right to know?
Absolutely. And some of what you're citing, it's, in my opinion, egregious.
We brought our story to State Representative Janet Cruz. She says the law deserves a second look.
I'm going to address these issues, and if we need to change the statutes, I will change them.
So what are we supposed to learn from this? Well, when you're researching a facility, don't just check the AHCA website. It clearly doesn't tell you everything. You want to search county court records using the name of the business and the owner. And the quickest way to find a red flag, believe it or not, is Google. Because if it's made headlines, you may find more details on the news story than AHCA is legally allowed to tell you. For the I-Team, Paul Legrone, ABC Action News.